Well, hi everyone, and welcome back to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today I want to talk with you about my favorite songwriter of all time. And this was a man who was really the quintessential songwriter for the rock and roll era, but one who wasn't really addicted to or tied to or bound to the musical tropes or styles of any era. He was universal in his appeal, but unique in his approach. He was someone who wrote songs that were inquisitive, introspective, and in many cases melancholy, but never songs that left you feeling down. He would make you think and he would make you feel simultaneously. This man is, of course, the great and still alive and well Jimmy Webb. And insofar as he is, you should check out a relatively recent interview he did with everyone's friend Rick Beato. So before going into more about what I truly love about Jimmy Webb's songwriting, I want to just run by some of my favorite songs that he wrote, beginning with what some would argue is his magnum opus, the sort of psychedelic progressive pop song MacArthur Park. What a song. And one thing that we've got to remember is that not only did Jimmy write the music, but also the lyrics. So these songs are really Jimmy's. And it's a song about lost love. It's a song about unwanted change. It's a song about feeling lost in a crowd. It's a song about a man going through a crisis of introspection, based on a true story of Jimmy essentially mourning the love affair gone that he had with a woman in MacArthur Park, where they used to meet for lunch because she worked by MacArthur Park, which is, of course, a large park, used to be very beautiful in the middle of the Westlake district of LA. In more recent years, it's been a place where people go to get fake IDs, drugs, or get stabbed. But hopefully, it will be a clean and family friendly place again where people like Jimmy Webb can think of beautiful songs. He even once performed it himself in MacArthur Park before it really went downhill. But of course, the actor Richard Harris is the man who made it famous. Many others have done their versions. The Scottish prog rock band Beggar's Opera does a great version. Glenn Campbell has performed it many times with his good friend Jimmy Webb. And if you ever have any doubt that Glenn Campbell is a shredder on guitar, listen to any of his performances on the electric guitar with Jimmy accompanying him on the piano. He can shred, and it really goes well with that song. Another great collaboration of the many that Jimmy Webb did with Glenn Campbell is a song called Galveston. Now, Glenn Campbell, before he met Jimmy Webb, was a very straight laced kind of guy, immensely talented, highly in demand as a session musician and as a country performer on both the six string, 12 string, and vocal. But Jimmy was coming from a background of sort of rock and roll. He grew up admiring the kind of great arrangers that did some of the best so-called classic pop albums. Think Frank Sinatra, and in particular Don Costa and Gordon Jenkins, two of Sinatra's very best arrangers. Part of him was influenced by that, and the other part was influenced by the new rock and roll of the day, the Beatles, the Beach Boys, who were in their Pet Sounds heyday in the mid 60s, things like that. And Jimmy thought, I want to be a rock star because it was becoming increasingly prominent not just to perform other people's songs, but to work in a band setting where the songs were written within the band. But he soon realized, due to circumstance, that while he may have had rock and roll dreams for himself, his great calling in life, his great talent was as a lyricist and music composer who would then work with great artists to make the songs into something truly spectacular. And Glenn Campbell was someone who was very much associated with Webb. Now, Galveston sounds like a love song, but it's really an anti war song. It was a song about dreaming of happier days in Galveston, Texas, while one is in the middle of the jungles of Vietnam, fearing that one might die. A deeply moving song. While we're continuing on a roll with the Campbell Webb collaborations, by the time I get to Phoenix, made famous by Glenn Campbell, sung by everyone from Sinatra to rock groups and everyone in between, a song about leaving someone's love. Sun Shower, what a great song. And it was on Thelma Houston's first album, where all of the songs she sings are Jimmy Webb songs. And this one, Sun Shower, is really, really, really a showstopper. So you've got to listen to that. Others have sung it. There was actually a somewhat rare English progressive rock band, progressive folk, you might want to call them, called Affinity, who also did it well, but Thelma's voice is just unmatched there. A slightly rarer song, A Lament to Childhood Lost, Where's the Playground, Susie? That was another Glenn Campbell, Jimmy Webb collaboration. Maybe not as famous as some of the others, but it really should be. Look at another one that is also in the lesser known category, but one of my absolute favorites, Keep It Hid. Wonderful song. Again, this sort of bucolic, introspective, psychedelic, Baroque, some would say. Very interesting song. And again, it's been performed by many great artists that you can see for yourself. But I really love the version by the vocal pop rock the vocal pop rock group, and Peter picked a pack of pickled peppers in Peterborough. And this was a band called the Vogues. So definitely check that out. Keep It Hid by the Vogues, a Jimmy Webb song and lyric, of course. This was a song that I mentioned the other week when we were talking about the birthday of Joe Cocker, The Moon's a Harsh Mistress. It's been done by so many people. Joan Baez did it, so many people, but my favorite is Joe Cocker. He really puts his heart and soul into it, and there's yearning, there's sentiment, but he makes it very masculine at the same time. Very, very beautiful performance there. He did a lot of work, Jimmy Webb, for the fifth dimension, perhaps best associated with This Is the Dawning of the Age of Aquarius and Let the Sun Shine In from Hair. But Up, Up and Away in My Beautiful Balloon was, of course, a Jimmy Webb song, as was Which Way to Nowhere, a wonderful melancholic tune by the fifth dimension, where the wonderful interlocking vocal harmonies really, really shine. So definitely check that one out. Um, Didn't We is a great one. Richard Harris sung it along with MacArthur Park on the album they worked on together. Frank Sinatra did a wonderful version of Didn't We. He did quite a few Jimmy Webb songs. He did By the Time I Get to Phoenix. He did Didn't We. He even did a very abridged version of MacArthur Park, wouldn't you know? Possibly the most famous song that Jimmy Webb ever did was Wichita Lineman. Everyone has done it. Kool and the Gang even did a jazz funk instrumental version of it, which works really well. Glenn Campbell's still probably the most famous singer of that song, but everyone has sung it. And when you listen to it, you'll know why. Roberta Flack, one of the finest female vocalists of all time, did a great version of See You Then. Again, one of these rarer cuts by Jimmy Webb, which just shows that not only were his hits wonderful songs, but so were some of his album tracks. One of the best songs by Art Garfunkel, All I Know, that was, of course, a Jimmy Webb song. And the list could go on. He didn't do any bad songs. There's the Highwaymen project that he worked on in the late 70s. He just kept writing and writing. And of course, he released albums where he was playing and singing, including one he did at the end of the 70s with the guys from Toto, wouldn't you know? And it was a good album. It was in many ways the best Jimmy Webb album where he was singing and playing, because Jimmy Webb was someone who knew the guys in Toto, not all of them, but many of them, since they were kids. And that's because their parents, in many cases, were the session musicians that frequently worked with Jimmy Webb. So when he came out with the album Angel Heart, it was 82, sorry, not late 70s, early 80s, with a lot of the Toto guys on it, you can really feel a sense of camaraderie. And even though sort of that more orchestral style of arrangement from the 60s and early 70s is what people associate Webb with, this was a very contemporary for the time arrangement, and it really works. Now, what made Jimmy Webb and what makes Jimmy Webb special, because he is very much alive and well, we have to say that because we've lost so many greats, is that he was able to balance direct human emotional experiences with ethereal and metaphysical conveyance mechanisms. And these conveyance mechanisms, the mechanisms through which this meaning and through which these emotions were conveyed, they were both musical and lyrical. And so, for instance, by the time I get to Phoenix, you might think, well, it's a song about traveling. Well, it's really a song about leaving someone that you no longer love, but it's also about traveling. There's the direct imagery and the broader, more metaphorical imagery. The Wichita lineman, it's about how Jimmy Webb was driving through the Great Plains and saw a lineman up on the telephone line. Not Jeff Lynne's, I don't think, but it's also about isolation. It's about the repetition of life when you can neither see anything before you or behind you because everything is just flat. Is it a hopeful song? Is it a mournful song? It depends on your interpretation. You could do this with almost every great Jimmy Webb song. He was a master of subtlety, but a subtlety which hit you on the first listen. These weren't songs that you need to listen to multiple times to feel the beauty of them. It hits you immediately, but the more you listen, you pick things up in the arrangement, in the composition, in the lyrics, and the sum total of all of these things that you may have missed on your first two, three, four, five, 10 listens. That's how wonderfully intricate Jimmy Webb songs are. And to top it off, he's a really nice man who loves music and generally loves the musicians that he's played with. So make yourself a Jimmy Webb playlist on your favorite streaming service. Go out and buy the records, do a bit of everything. Jimmy Webb was a great songwriter who was influenced equally by the optimism of the 60s rock generation, but also was deeply informed by church music, classical music, and the wonderful, lush, sophisticated arrangements of those great 50s and 60s records of Frank Sinatra and others of that classic pop genre. Don't mess around with Jimmy Webb. He'll give you a great time on your playlist today, tomorrow, and the next day. Like, subscribe. We will see you next time. Take care.